My name's Ray McAllister. I gave Devacor Systems 8 years. I was the lead infrastructure engineer, the guy who rebuilt the back end after the breach in 18, who kept the thing upright through budget cuts and bad leadership. That Wednesday started just like any other. I was finishing some back-end diagnostics on AtlasNet, a smart logistics AI I designed from the ground up. Around 3:00 p.m., I got a meeting ping. It was from Craig, the CEO, and Diane from HR. No subject, just immediate. I felt my stomach twist, but I didn't break stride. Walking to the meeting, I passed by the server room. Machines I personally configured, still humming away, oblivious to what was about to happen. I passed a hallway lined with corporate milestone photos, all featuring Craig, none with me. I didn't let that bother me. Not today. In the boardroom, Craig was already sitting at the head of the table. His eyes didn't meet mine as he read from a script. We're restructuring. Your role is dissolved. Effective immediately. I nodded, like I was hearing something routine. You want the laptop now? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Craig looked up, like he'd been expecting that, maybe even rehearsing it. Yes. Security was already waiting outside the door. As they flanked me, I stared Craig down. Good luck demoing AtlasNet tomorrow, without me. His smirk faltered, just for a second. But I didn't stop walking. The elevator doors slid shut behind me, and I knew the countdown had already begun. AtlasNet's failsafe would hit full lockdown in 9 minutes, just like I designed it. Minute 1, invalid admin trigger. Minute 3, core modules began looping. Minute 6, subsystem panic. By minute 9, the entire system was dead in the water. Diagnostics scrambled, the back end hung, and the whole thing was in chaos. At 5:10 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Eli, one of the few guys left at DevCore who didn't hate my guts. He was senior back end, good at his job, smart enough to know when things were going wrong. Craig's panicking, he said, voice tight. The system's dead. They think it's sabotage. I took a second, then answered, It isn't. It's working like it should. I could hear Eli exhale on the other end. He didn't have to say it, but I knew he was stuck in the middle of this mess, trying to keep everything together without getting dragged into it. He was the kind of guy who didn't want to burn bridges, but sometimes you couldn't avoid it. DevCore's office was chaos. Engineers were scrambling, fingers flying across keyboards, monitors blinking red in 1,000 different shades of alarm. The hum of the servers buzzed louder than usual, like they knew something was coming. The air was thick, tight with frustration and fear. It was like everyone knew they were on borrowed time, waiting for the inevitable collapse. Craig was standing at the front of the room, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the span of a single afternoon. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up. His face was a mix of exhaustion and desperation, like a man who had already lost but didn't know it yet. Can you fix it? He asked, his voice hoarse, almost pleading. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I slid a USB drive onto the table between us, its red light blinking slowly. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He knew I had him, and we both knew that I wasn't here to just fix the damn thing. Sure, I said, keeping my tone flat, but we talk first. Craig's eyes flickered to the drive, then back to me. You think you can negotiate? I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I know I can. He exhaled, a mix of disbelief and irritation. But I wasn't asking for much, not really. I wanted what was mine, and I was done playing nice. I listed off what I wanted, each point sharp and deliberate. Full public credit as lead architect. 25% equity in AtlasNet, backdated to the start. A seat on the board. Craig's face contorted like I had slapped him. You're insane. I didn't flinch. No, you're desperate. I let the words settle in the air for a second. There it was, the truth. They'd tried to erase me, tried to pretend like AtlasNet was just another cog in their machine. But now that they were staring at the wreckage, they realized they needed me more than I needed them. He shuffled through a few papers, his fingers trembling as he drafted a new contract. He tried to reduce the equity offer, sliding the revised contract over to me with a look that said, Please, just take it. I didn't even look at it. I stood up, folding my arms across my chest. If the numbers change, I said, turning to walk toward the door, so does my willingness to fix this. There was a beat of silence, then a muttered curse. I knew I had him. They knew they were running out of options. Craig called after me, voice tight, but I didn't turn around. Wait, he said, desperation clawing at the edges of his words. "I'll get it signed." The deal was done by midnight. I hadn't even looked at the revised contract. I knew it would be exactly what I wanted. By the time Craig had signed his name, the lights in the office were dimming, the chaos subsiding just enough to let the finality of it all sink in. I handed him the USB drive. "This restores system trust," I said. "But from now on, any admin changes get logged back to me. Every single one." Craig looked at the drive, then up at me. There was something flickering in his eyes, some mix of anger and realization. That drive was just the start, a stopgap, until I could rebuild control the right way. "You don't trust us?" he asked, like he didn't already know the answer. I looked him dead in the eye, steady as a rock. "You fired me?" The next morning, I walked into DevCore through the front doors. No badge, no escort, just me and the new contract in my hand, the ink still fresh. The building felt different now, like a place I didn't belong to anymore, but one I still had every right to be in. Some people looked up when I passed by, their faces frozen in a mix of surprise and confusion. Others avoided eye contact, too nervous to acknowledge me, like I was some kind of ghost who shouldn't be there. I didn't care. I wasn't here to make friends. Eli spotted me from across the room and flashed a quick smile. He was one of the few who didn't seem rattled by the whole thing. "You really pulled it off," he said, shaking his head. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but I knew he could hear the truth in my voice. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here to make sure AtlasNet stays protected." But part of me was lying. Yeah, I wanted to make sure the system was safe. But there was something else, something I wasn't ready to admit even to myself. I wanted revenge, not fire and fury, but something quieter. Something that made people stop pretending like I was just a cog in the machine. I wanted them to see who really built this thing. By noon, the investors were in the building. The demo was scheduled, and Craig had to introduce me as co-lead architect. That little title alone told me everything I needed to know. Who was really in charge now? And it wasn't him. The room was filled with the kind of tension you only get in boardrooms full of money and egos. I kept my cool, walking them through AtlasNet's capabilities. It handled 5 predictive tasks in real time, something that had taken months of fine-tuning, each algorithm painstakingly built by my hands. I didn't rush through it. I let them see every detail, every line of code that had become a part of the system. After the demo, I wasn't just another voice in the room anymore. Investors came to me directly, no middlemen, no more pretending that Craig was the genius behind it all. They asked me questions, looked me in the eye like they knew I was the one who held the answers. And that was the moment I knew. I wasn't just a piece of the system anymore. I was the system. A few weeks in, I started to notice something off. AtlasNet flagged some suspicious access patterns, late-night logins, code duplication attempts. It wasn't unusual for some data to get copied here and there. People always needed a backup. But the frequency, the timing, it wasn't normal. And then there was the source, finance. That didn't sit right. I dug deeper, checking logs, looking for any signs of an anomaly. What I found made my stomach drop. Traces of someone pulling core documentation. They were encrypting outbound packets, redirecting data to untraceable locations. I narrowed it down, step by step, until I hit the name, Rachel, Craig's assistant. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting it sink in. Rachel had been feeding our code to a shell company, something called DevCore Ventures. I checked the business filings. Craig was listed as its executive, and Rachel, she was a co-founder. I sat there, fingers frozen over the keyboard. They were trying to clone AtlasNet, cut me out, and sell the knockoff to investors. It wasn't just a breach anymore. This was theft, plain and simple. I didn't get mad, not yet. I'd been through this before, seen people try to steal from me in more ways than I could count. I wasn't about to let this slide, though. I wasn't going to burn down the house in some emotional fit of rage. I was going to make sure that when they tried to steal from me, they got nothing. That night, I activated Phase 2. AtlasNet had a hidden kill switch, one I designed just for this kind of situation. If unauthorized copies of the code were ever made, I could send a signal that would corrupt the data, turning it into garbage. To Craig and Rachel, it would look like they had the code, but what they'd actually have was a useless mess. I sat back in my chair, watching the system execute. The familiar whir of the servers in the background was almost comforting now. I didn't have to panic. I didn't have to chase them down. AtlasNet would handle it. And in the morning, when they tried to sell their stolen version, they'd be the ones looking like idiots. Craig called me into his office the next day, his voice barely contained under the surface of fury. I knew what was coming the moment I saw him standing there, fists clenched at his sides. "The backups are corrupted," he spat, his words coming out in a sharp, jagged hiss. I didn't flinch. "Backups of what?" I asked, keeping my tone cool, calm. "You know what?" he snapped. I leaned back against the doorframe, folding my arms. "AtlasNet only responds to authorized control now," I said, not even pretending to be sorry. He was seething, pacing now, eyes wild with a mix of frustration and panic. "You've gone too far," he hissed, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "No," I said, stepping forward, looking him dead in the eye. "You did." I didn't wait for him to speak again. I opened the logs, every transfer to DevCore Ventures laid out in black and white. I watched his eyes flicker across the screen, the realization hitting him like a sucker punch. He'd messed up. Not only had he tried to steal from me, but he'd left a trail so wide it was practically begging to be found. And now, he knew I had him. His shoulders sagged slightly, and the silence between us felt heavy. He muttered under his breath, more to himself than to me. "You don't get to win this." I didn't even hesitate. "I already did," I said, holding his gaze. "Check the source code." The silence stretched on for a beat too long. I could almost hear him scrambling in his head, trying to think of a way out, but there wasn't one. I turned and walked out, calm, controlled, and unbothered. I didn't need to say anything else. He knew, and whatever came next, that was on him. I sent the full report to the board, logs, timestamps, shell company filings, stolen code transfers, everything. It was bulletproof. The moment they got it, they called an emergency meeting. Not Craig, me. When I walked into the boardroom, the tension hit me like a slap. The usual polished suits were all there, sitting stiff in their chairs, like they knew something was coming, but didn't know how bad it would be. Craig was already there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His face was a shade of pale I hadn't seen before. Rachel wasn't there. She was a no-show, probably already halfway out the door, getting her story straight with a lawyer, or whoever else she thought would save her. The chairwoman, Evelyn Sharp, looked at the pile of documents in front of me. She didn't even blink, didn't raise her voice. Her eyes flicked to Craig once, then back to me. "Do you deny any of this?" Craig opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. Then he tried to shift the blame. "It wasn't me. It was Rachel. I didn't let him finish. I slid the papers across the table, right under his nose. It was all there, clear as day. Both their names, tied to every transfer, every shady deal. Evelyn didn't flinch. She just turned to me, looking for one last answer. "Can the real system still run?" I didn't hesitate. "Perfectly," I said, my voice steady. "And it's under biometric lock now." She nodded like she'd already made her decision. It wasn't about what I said anymore. It was about what they couldn't ignore. Craig's face was twisted, like he was watching his world crumble and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. Rachel's absence spoke louder than anything. Evelyn turned to the rest of the board, her voice crisp, unshakable. "The vote is unanimous. Craig, fired. Rachel Donovan, terminated. DevCore Ventures, dissolved." I felt it hit me all at once. They had to make it official. The room buzzed with the weight of the decision, but for me, it was the sound of closure. Then, just like that, I was named interim CTO. Control of AtlasNet was mine. No more negotiating, no more begging to be seen. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't have to beg to be believed. They couldn't ignore me now, and that felt better than any victory I'd ever imagined. Over the next month, things shifted fast. We closed 4 major contracts, including one with a logistics firm that was still recovering from a massive breach. They needed security they could trust, and I gave it to them. I wasn't just fixing their problems. I was making sure they never had to face them again. The real test came with the new launch. The crowd in the room felt different this time. The suits, the investors, the people who used to see me as just another cog in the machine now knew exactly who I was. They knew what AtlasNet could do, but this time, I stood on that stage, presenting it as its creator, not just a voice behind the curtain. Applause echoed, and for a split second, I let myself take it in. Recognition. Not vengeance, not rage, just justice. A sense that I wasn't invisible anymore, that the system I built wasn't just some anonymous tool, it was mine, and people were finally seeing it for what it was. When I got back to my desk, AtlasNet pinged me. Status, secure. Threats, neutralized. I leaned back in my chair, letting that message sink in. It meant more than any applause. It meant I was in control. It meant no one could touch what was mine without facing the consequences. I didn't stop there. I immediately began embedding deeper protocols into the next update. Zero trust until proven otherwise. Full transparency. I wasn't just making AtlasNet secure for my sake anymore. I was making it bulletproof for anyone who tried to hijack it again. No one was going to steal my work again. Not while I was still standing, not while the system was still watching. I wasn't going to let it happen. Not ever again. One afternoon, a young guy named Jay knocked on my door. New dev. Smart, but green. Nervous, too. His shoulders tight, his eyes darting around like he wasn't sure whether to be here or not. He hesitated for a second before speaking. "Can I ask something?" he said, his voice quieter than it probably needed to be. I looked up, nodded. "Yeah, what's up?" He shifted his weight, fidgeting with a sleeve. "How'd you know when to fight back?" I sat back in my chair, letting the question settle. It wasn't the first time someone had asked me something like that, but something about his voice, the way he asked it, made me pause for longer than usual. "I didn't," I said, quiet at first. "Not always." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "But when someone tries to take what you built just because they think they can, that's the line." Jay nodded, like he understood, even if he didn't yet know what that line felt like. I felt the weight of it all in my chest, the weight of 8 years spent watching people use me, ignore me, push me aside. "Don't just protect your code," I added. "Protect your name." That's what stuck with me. DevCore tried to erase me. They thought I was disposable. But they forgot one thing. I built the thing they stood on. I didn't build it to be stolen. I built it to remember. Jay looked like he was chewing on my words, like they meant something he'd only just started to grasp. He didn't say anything else, but I could tell he was thinking it over, letting the truth sit with him. So, if you're ever wondering whether to push back, whether to stand up for what's yours, here's my advice. Make it so. When they come for what you've built, the system fights back with you. Not out of spite, out of principle. That's not revenge. That's engineering.